help me understand the weeds. Let's get into the weeds of like what Bryzos does exactly. I mean, is it a trading platform? Or are you guys handling any stock? Or I mean, how does it work from beginning to end?
Well, so to answer your kind of middle question, we don't own any stock, period. Um, in my view, I thought that would be frowned upon by
Okay.
members, meaning that if you take ownership of it, because I think that a lot of industry gets a little worried about who's stripping profits out of things, right? And there's the trust sensitivity in supply chains is real.
Hello, folks. Greg here, your host of the show. We have Shep Hickey today, and he talks about Bryzos, which is an online marketplace for the metals industry and some other products as well. We talk about, you know, why it's important and the inception of Bryzos and why it's key and why it's happening and the digital transformation that's going on in, America, North America, and why it's important. So we talk about many things. We talk about how it works. We talk about why it's important. We talk about Shep's history, and I'm thankful to have him on the show so that you can learn and I can learn. So thank you and enjoy the show without any further delay. Shep Hickey. Greg Sheldon here, your host of Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the metals and manufacturing industry that make your modern day life possible. Welcome, everybody. Greg Sheldon here on the Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast. We have Shep Hickey here today, and he is, we were just sharing, we share a lot of the same sentiments around the metal industry and that it could adopt some new things to add value to the industry. So, thank you, Shep, for coming today. Appreciate you. And so, how'd you get here? How did we get here? What's Shep all about?
I guess solutions is what I'm all about. um, as it pertains to business related things. Yeah, as you mentioned, started a company called Bryzos.com, which is an online metals marketplace. That I guess I'll just say that it's called Bryzos. You begin with the end in mind. It's called Bryzos and not Steel Mart because the vision is that steel is so complicated from an attribute standpoint. There's so many different descriptors. Like a steel valve. I mean, how many lines do you need to describe what you need? So if you can get a steel valve to get traded online, I think there are a lot of other products, non-steel products like lumber and other things that would very easily lend themselves to being traded in a digital format. So really Bryzos, which the idea is to say, if we can do this very difficult product type, there are adjacent product types that should be traded here as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So what was the inception of the Shep? Were you there from the very beginning, or, what was it? How did the vision all start? Was it just, a necessity that you felt was needed, or?
Well, I was in steel distribution for a long time,
Yeah.
and when I started, I was proofreading invoices. Okay, so we would, how do we do that? We create a paper invoice, throw them on my desk. I'd make sure that like the invoice, the packing list, the signed bill of lading, the mill test reports, search papers, whatever you want to call them, that they all sort of jive together. And then I'd walk over to the massive scanner and I'd scan them all. It's every day. And then I would then break them down, name the files, and email them out. And so that was like my start into the industry, and worked from there. So then I went into what we call buyout or transactional purchasing. So a salesperson would sell something knowing that we don't have it in stock. They drop it on my desk, say a couple awful things to me, and then walk away, and I'd go buy it. And we'd bring it in and switch out paperwork and send it off, which is very common. I mean, statistically, I think in distribution, at least in metals, about 30% of a given company's revenue is generated by spot buying. So I did that for a while, and that is when I'm telling you, it's like 2010. That is the moment that like Bryzos was thought of. I was like, this is insane. The way that this is being done, like the invoicing, that was a little nuts, but like this is insane because I just bought this yesterday, and I've got to go out for pricing today because inventory volatility demands that I do. Right. So the guy who was at $10 yesterday, maybe he sold 8,000 feet, and now he's at $12. He didn't want to run out. So you have to constantly be going back out to market. So I'm like, all right, mental note, got to start a marketplace in the future. But knew that I didn't know anything.
Right.
And I was like, if I start this now, I'll be back where I am and I can have my job back. So just sort of shelved the idea and then went into stock purchasing. And so we're buying from mills around the world or domestically and expediting and managing the logistics of it and so forth. Did that for a while, and then I got onto the ERP implementation team along the way, and that was a bit of an uprooting of highly disruptive process, and then got into the design of supplementary design of software, because it seems to me that all ERPs have the same thing in common, which is they're really good at telling you kind of like the status this second, but not really good at telling you about something that's going to explode in about 5 minutes. Like they don't look around the corner. So my thought was like, how do we assemble data that we have to say, and based on our information of operating, how can we look for sort of the convergence of certain patterns to say this order is about to absolutely hit the fan? So sort of supplementing and helping us sort of periscope up operationally. So started working on that kind of as in conjunction or alongside, and then we got an opportunity to quote on some large solar plants, one in Arizona, one out in California. And so there were kind of a couple thousand line items, right? I mean, just an enormous stuff. And I still didn't really know what I was doing. To the credit of the CEO, who's, I guess, a master delegator, dropped this thing on my desk and in his own way asked me not to mess it up. And so I opened it up, and it was just like this bid pack. We didn't even bid it yet. And so I'm sitting here reading about all this, and I was just like, it isn't going to go well at all, especially with me doing it. And so, but no, we quoted it, and we got the deal. And it had steel in it, but it also had stuff that wasn't steel in it.
Right.
And that's where I really got insight to how are all these different products being traded. And I was the one-man project division, right? So I bid it. I actually negotiated that contract. I sourced it all. We're talking thousands of line items of things. Like if there were electrical pieces in there were washers, bolts, steel, I just like everything across the board. Yeah. And then did all the third-party services. Like for instance, for the pipe, there was a spec a cleaning spec where every single piece had to OD and ID blasted, and had to have then put water-based rust inhibitor in the ID. It had to have X amount of desiccant bags per cubic foot of ID space, and then they had to be capped with Tyvek tape, right? Every single piece, and we're talking about an entire plant. So managing all of that, and then booked all the logistics, all the trucks that were going out there. So now, getting thousands of truckloads of booking that I'm doing over these series of years that I'm doing this. These are long projects. So that's where I really got like the holistic. And then I was actually doing the invoicing, by the way.
Right, right.
So I was doing from end to end. I was running a company within this company,
Hmm.
right? And that's when it really, I was like, I get this. And I was along the way became the data miner also for our business,
Oh, wow.
right? So I was doing the ODBC connection and like going in and writing all the sort of the logic to pull out, try and pull the nuggets together, right? So we can do some stuff.
Yeah.
And so just kind of like at this really uh, broad exposure to how distribution works, and did that, and then along the way refined some of our own processes, and then after that project management stint, I was promoted CEO of the business, and excuse me, did that for a handful of years, and kind of reached the point I was kind of looking for some indication of when was a good time to start this marketplace. There were a couple of markers that I was looking for. One was sort of a social thing, like what's happening socially. And I'll give you an example. Is one thing that just really caught my attention was that for many of the years that I was there, during lunchtime, everyone would go down to the kitchen and play hearts in the BS for an hour.
Yeah.
Right. And just kind of, because we 12 to 1 every single day. So you go down there and just BS for an hour. And then I just kind of like several years later, I look up and everyone's sitting at their desk, like just sort of scrolling through their phones.
Uh-huh.
It's basically the same group of people. It's not like, somebody had joined the company and thrown the social dynamic off.
Yeah.
It was like all of a sudden, the preference was to sit at a desk and go like this for an hour,
Hmm.
versus talk to their buddy they love to give, a hard time.
Hmm.
And so that to me was a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, how are people communicating supply and demand? And so when I started, it was either fax, email, or telephone. And then all of a sudden text started coming in. People were texting each other stuff,
Yep.
which is a drive towards simplicity.
Hmm.
Because I think if you ask most people, what's the most simple way to communicate, right? Like all sort of written manner goes out the window,
Yeah.
right? It's a bullet point communication, and the form says that's okay. So it becomes a very easy way to discuss things.
Yeah.
So when I saw those two things, I was like, we're gonna be early to do it, but if we don't jump right now, and if I don't jump right now and go do this, it will be too late, because it's gonna take a handful of years to get people to even trust this concept.
Hmm.
Like regardless if like it's even perfect or not.
Yeah.
Like just the idea of like, how many times will you have to say we're Bryzos an online marketplace before people are like, fine? It's going to take a while for
Yeah.
people to just be like, okay, I've got my head around the fact that this exists.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how we got to where we are. And I'll just add to that lastly that the kind of what I set out to solve, I think was simple, which is create the go-to marketplace for buying and selling. And that could be, and it's agnostic, meaning that mills could be on here, distributors, brokers, end users, fabricators. Like, because that was my experience. Like I dealt with kind of the word I want. I mean, I interacted with all those different types of players.
Right.
So it was only natural to me that all of those different type of players would be able to interact on Bryzos, and which is what happens. So the idea was to create this go-to marketplace that has liquidity, where people can easily buy and sell things, either via listings or RFQs, right? It had to be both. And then the other thing I wanted to address was the credit situation, meaning it makes sense. I get it, but it doesn't make sense that a distributor could buy something from a mill have it on the ground, like totally ready to sell. So they've paid for it one time already. It's a sunk cost at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's an investment. We'll see. And then just to have a seat at the table to sell something, they have to be willing to give somebody credit. So they have to have the mentality that we're willing to buy this twice, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make sense. So how do we solve for that? How do we de-risk that second leg, which is selling into the market?
Yes.
And so that's what we did before, like BMPL was BMPL. We had a solution we built that at that time, buyers were getting net 90, free net 90, and sellers were guaranteed payment on day 30.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's just like a massive leap forward.
Oh, for sure it is. Yeah. So that's brilliant, man. And I've recognized that as well. The whole industry deals on credit. And if you can bring that time period down, it helps tremendously with your cash flows. So what's the goal to get down to zero, like almost zero? I mean, maybe not zero, but almost zero to do that transaction much more quickly to help the cash flows? Is that?
So I just had this conversation, and in my mind, bringing it to zero is sort of a troublemaker
Okay.
because
Everybody else is going to be upset.
well, meaning that it can be done. Like today, we could say, you know what, we're going to pay out on day zero, but that really throws the material risk out of whack, right? Because you have a seller that's like paying your home builder before they get out of their truck.
Well, that's
It's like
happening today, yeah, but yeah.
and so there's a reason that it's net 30 typically.
Right.
Yeah, people want to pay later, but also it provides this time period where goods can be moved, inspected, and received.
I see.
So you want to afford that time because really there's the operational component of this too, which is it's messy for a seller because most sellers are like built around the fact they can get paid in 30 days. I take it a step further that the seller's more interested in the guarantee of payment than when they're going to, as long as they know for a fact that they're going to get paid,
Yeah.
that's by and large and within reason, the comfort that needs to be created.
Mm-hmm.
But it's messy for a seller, just as it is for a buyer, if they deliver something and it's the wrong thing. And now they've already have money, right? So you've just created twice the amount of unwinding that needs to occur. And how is that seller benefited by getting that money early?
Yeah.
Now you've taken something that could take, a couple of people to get unwound. Now you'd probably have the whole accounting department, asking people like, how do I back this out? And, all this stuff going on. So the idea is like, and I used this analogy the other day, which is like the pitcher's mound is 60 feet, 6 inches for a reason, right? It didn't start there. Like you move that thing up to 60 inches, boring. Baseball gets even more, or 60 feet, baseball gets even more boring, right? If you move it back to 61 feet, people would be hitting them into the river.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that there's this balance between cash flow and quality of goods that I think we've just sort of found this spot that works. And you could argue like as the batter, it depends where you are. If the batter like, yeah, move it back to 62 feet, it'd be great. But the other side like, nah, I'd probably getting too many runs. So I think we found the sweet spot.
Do you think there's a chance of easing into it, over time? Because, as a culture, we're getting more used to paying for things right away, like Amazon as an example, right? I mean,
Well, I think that, so you're saying like, would a buyer ever get to a point where it's just like, why don't we just pay now? Is that what you're asking?
yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I think it depends on which, I guess, strata of the market where you are. Meaning like you have, I don't mean that from like a quality of the company standpoint. I mean like companies deliberately deal in different tiers of quality, right? They could be in prime steel, but they decided no, we're gonna do surplus, or we're gonna do reconditioned or whatever. So I think depending on where you reside in sort of that hierarchy of newness of material, I think that's going to dictate how the buyer's going to be paying. Right? I think the further you get away from the material being new, the more likely it is that that's going to be like a cash deal.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're further and further away from the specification to which it was made. Right. And so and they want it quick. They just want it done. Whereas I think when you get to like the newer prime material, I think there's always going to be the sellers. I mean, one of the reasons you have terms is it basically is an inducement to get buyers to buy from you. Right? Yeah. You don't have to pay now.
Yeah.
Pay later. You pay me when you get paid. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that there's always that inducement there to get, if a seller has the balance sheet to say you can pay me later, I think that'll always be attractive to a buyer who is in turn waiting to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think cash flow will always be important, and it's we let buyers offload that burden to a third party, right? With buy now, pay later.
Yeah.
But we'll see how buy now, pay later fares over time. I don't really know what that looks like in the future. I think it's a fantastic thing, and I think it's a secure thing to do.
Yeah.
But to what extent is that going to be just flat out accepted, lock, stock, and barrel across the industry? I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, I know that other industries, construction, they offer discounts for paying early, that sort of stuff, right? So it could be gamified or whatever you want to call it, whatever the buzzword is. And then there's the financial tools, right, that you can do, factoring and whatnot. So cool, man. So help me understand the weeds. Let's get into the weeds of like what Bryzos does exactly. I mean, is it a trading platform, or are you guys handling any stock, or I mean, how does it work from beginning to end?
Well, so to answer your kind of middle question, we don't own any stock, period. In my view, I thought that would be frowned upon by members, meaning that if you take ownership of it, because I think that a lot of industry gets a little worried about who's stripping profits out of things, right? And there's the trust sensitivity in supply chains is real, right?
Trust is real everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you can't mess with this stuff. And so I made the decision we can't own it. We can't do that, because as soon as we do, regardless of what we say, people will be like, you're some way, somehow, like getting into our deal here.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want. I mean, the idea, remember, I was a buyer. I just want an easier way for people to buy and sell.
Yeah, man.
Which is an easy thing to say, but that actually needs a lot of scaffolding to get done. But simply a buyer can come to the website and they can browse seller listings that are priced, okay, and just throw them in a cart and buy it, and they can have net 60, right? So could not be easier. And then they can also, if they want, they can create an RFQ or an RFP, wherever you come from, right? RFQ, request for quotation, and they can upload or manually type in a bill of material. Okay, and they click submit. It's anonymous. Sellers aren't going to know who that is. And to a degree, it can be argued that it doesn't matter anymore, because you're outsourcing your credit risk as a seller, right? You're not dependent upon that buyer to get paid anymore. They're going to get paid before their bills even due.
Yeah.
So it's literally not dependent on it. And so a buyer submits an RFQ. If sellers want, they can set up their matching engine criteria. So if you sell, plate, or angle and somebody's looking for pipe, it won't, you can say, I don't want to see those. Right. But anyway, so the RFQ gets sent out to the seller, and they quote it. And it's just what we do really well is we're also managing those steps. So if you say, I want, whatever, A36 or 572 grade 50, and then they counter with a different grade, we're highlighting that change and it kind of stacking these different steps so you can see the story of how you got to what you ended up buying. And it's highlighting substitutions that have been made along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's done that way is because when things don't go as planned and you're like, well, maybe you're doing a post-mortem at your company, you're like, well, how did that thing get so off the rails in the first place? And we have the story right there for you. Like, because traditionally you've got someone like a Post-it and someone like in your head, someone's on a phone call and you're like scouring your email to like try reconstruct how things got messed up. And so what we're doing, and this is sort of more of an operational thing, is giving you as much visibility into the iterations of building a deal as possible. And we're greatly reducing the amount of times that information needs to be transcribed from one piece of paper to another.
Beautiful.
Because as COO of the business, where I was prior to this, I would say over 75% of the issues that we were sweeping up at any given moment, it was a transcription thing. Like someone wrote down the wrong length, they wrote down the wrong grade, or just didn't write it down, or they needed ends a certain way. It's just, it came down to somebody miscommunicating something.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I mean, that's all distribution is the proper communication.
Yep, that's all it is. Absolutely, communication is.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So back to your original question, which is what do we do? So we help people get from end to end. So you put an RFQ, they can quote back and forth, find a deal, they check out. Okay, and at that point, if a buyer checks out, that means we know for 100% certain, like totally certain, that the seller is going to get paid, because our checkout won't let it happen otherwise.
Right.
Either the funds are procured at that time, or they've got a line of credit through our platform.
Yeah.
That we know that like seller 100% going to get paid, provided they do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where the next step comes in, which is our post-transaction. So from the point of checkout, there's a 30-day window.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody's getting paid yet. Okay. But the funds are procured. Like they're like, think of like an escrow almost.
Okay.
Okay. So there's this, things are getting shipped, and you can go into the system and you say, well, I ordered 12 plates, or I ordered 100 feet, or whatever it is, a bundle. I ordered 10, I got 8. So in real time, we adjust down. So we'll credit buyers and then pay sellers. Once that kind of grace period is ended and things are finalized, we now have the final transaction amount on ship date plus 30. We distribute the funds based on what happened in those 30 days. So there's no like running back to the, accounts payable being like, don't pay that invoice. That type of thing's all been eliminated.
Right.
And so it's really from end to end. We do all the paperwork, like invoices. It's all on behalf of, though. Like we don't ever own anything. We're just a management system of flow.
Yeah.
So we're sending out POs and sales or acknowledgments, reminders like, hey, this is supposed to be there tomorrow, and is it shipped? And so really just trying to plug all the gaps that ERP systems sort of leave wide open.
Yeah, and I wanted to go there. So, I mean, are you guys an ERP as well, or are you thinking of integrating with a common ERP? Not that there really is a common. There's so many options. That's part of the problem.
Yeah. So what I want you to think about is it's like a digital core, right? Which is we have built out kind of Main Street for a transaction. Like we have each step of the transaction has just been laid out. And so what we do is we have the ability now to just bolt on. So we have got sort of the main thing taken care of. So if somebody comes in, like we really want to have like Quicken as part of this. And what we're doing is building these libraries of instant softwares that you can tap into. So ERPs, this is where we're going. We just went to a widget-based system. So you can add whatever you want to it. And so right now we're building that out, and it's kind of thing if someone's would have to be proactive in the moment, like, hey guys, can you add this? Like, yeah, we'll get to that, and it will be sooner than later, because we really want to build that out. And then the other thing we've just done is the idea of web stores. I guess you can think of like Shopify to a degree. Right. Okay, so a seller can instantly now create a web store, and it doesn't even have our name on it.
That's brilliant, man. Wow, good for you.
And so it's
white labeling, right?
Basically. It's white labeling. It's instant and it's free, literally.
Wow.
And
great idea.
So they can do all the stuff, basically giving them their own marketplace.
Yeah.
And it's an extremely powerful tool, because what it does is, let's say you're a buyer because you make washing machines or something. Well, how about you just list your washing machines on your storefront?
Yeah.
Right. And now you've built out a whole network of like, okay, I've got a storefront for my washing machines that are manufactured, but I also have a pipeline into my material supply. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I also have my financing solution built right on top of it. So we've completely created this linear system where the goods and the material are always working together to support whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome, man. That's really great. Because that's what so many companies need, is that support on the digital end of things, and if you're providing that, that's a tremendous value. Thank you for that.
I think it is.
Yeah. So, what's the, do you guys do the whole United States? Or, I'm sure that's long term. Are you guys there now? And when it comes to mills, well, let's answer that question first. Are you?
Yeah, we have, and this I think is a little bit mind blowing for some people, where we have, because of the network of buyers and sellers now, we have buyers in California buying from suppliers in Alabama.
Awesome.
So this whole freight radius thing is out the window.
Yeah.
And I've done the analysis, and it doesn't hold water.
Which part?
Well, just the idea that, it's 200-mile radius business, right?
Yeah, mostly.
Because of the freight's prohibitive. But for every time you buy on a marketplace, by saving just the smallest amount of money, you increase your radius by X%.
Okay.
Right? So the money you were spending for the extra freight can be applied to maybe some of the savings. And the thing is, it's not a race to the bottom, though, because people aren't beating each other on price. People are just coming to the table, and it's removing a pricing bias, meaning that over time, a seller knows their buyers really well. Yeah. Right? And you're like, oh, this guy's calling, watch this, and so it's not that it's a race to the bottom. It's more about keeping honest.
Yes.
Which are two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, the guy in Alabama is not like giving the stuff away. He just doesn't know who the guy is in California is, and doesn't know what the elasticity is with his quote. So it's not a race to the bottom. It's fair market is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's nationwide, and we had one yesterday where it's a Texas deal, and I think it ended up selling out Ohio. So it's really increased the radius.
Has it ever? Wow, that's a big
of sale dramatically.
Yeah,
dramatically.
And everybody's pretty receptive to that, or did they care?
I think that buyers want to buy.
That's it, right?
and buyers want to buy.
Okay.
And if you're not going to participate, you're willfully saying no to opportunity. And like you're willfully saying, well, I'm just going to forego that revenue,
Yeah. Which would be
you
silly.
know, which is not why you're there.
Yeah.
And it's, by the way, it's going to make the easiest thing you do all day.
Yeah.
We've only got like 10 seconds into it. 10 seconds of time committed to it.
Yeah, man. Okay, well, with that, on that vein, what do you say to the guy that, okay, we've run our business this way for 50 years, and my dad did it this way for the 50 before me. Why change now? I mean, the phone works just fine. What what would you say to that?
I would say, I totally understand what you're saying. And, I wouldn't pressure anyone to do anything they don't want to do. I don't believe in that. I want the our value proposition to resonate with people. And if somebody doesn't want to do it, they don't want to do it. But I would point out to them, by the way, that part of the reason that the company's been so successful is because their dad and their granddad, think of the pace of technology change during their tenure, right?
Yeah.
And that they would probably be more likely to accept this than you, because your whole life it's really been email and telephone, right? These guys went from probably mailing each other POs
Yep.
to telephone to fax to email. These guys are no stranger to technology evolving,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so to them, I think, and this has been our finding, is that the baby boomers are kind of like, it's not a big deal to them. They're just like, yeah, this is like, this is the fifth time we've had to do this. And
Wow.
it seems like it's getting better. So, but my ultimate message would be like, we're not here to like upset your business.
Hmm.
That's not what we're about. And everything about the way we're constructed, it reinforces that. Like we're taking ownership. We're not meddling in your business. We're truly here to support you as you go from here to there.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that simple. And myself, all of us at Bryzos being from the industry, like I totally get it. Like we were in that same trench with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would have no real pushback. I think, people go into business because they have goals, right? And if the company as it is today is sort of checking all those boxes, I would say sit tight. I would. That's what would be my honest response.
Beautiful. Well, that's awesome, man. When it comes to mills, like, are you guys buying all over, from everybody in the US, or are you keeping it in the US?
Okay, yeah, and I know what you meant, but just to clarify, so we don't buy anything, but I know what you meant.
Yeah. Who
Yeah,
are you
so
communicating with, I guess, is the question.
the buyers buy material of all origins, made in China,
Yeah.
made in India, whatever their restrictions allow for.
Hmm.
So, but because there are a large number of distribution companies on here, they're the ones sort of representing the world, and we just tie it together domestically. So, um, the back end of our site also has metric and has all sort of formatted actually really for non-steel, and it's also formatted for different currencies and different units of measure. But I kind of thought, the U.S. is pretty big,
Yes.
right? And maybe we'll crawl first.
Okay, fair enough, man.
Because all that stuff sitting there, I'm just like, you know what? Uh, I've heard many stories of like trying to take on too much too fast.
Of course, yeah. And it can be the demise of many great stories and products and businesses for sure.
Yeah. And I just don't think it sort of supports our mission, which is a mission of support, by the way. way by saying like, "Hey, we're global." I think they're like, "No, you're not." So I
Right.
think that being smart about it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts because you're so, in the trenches and finger on the pulse of, where is everything going on a big scale. Like there's deglobalization happening, right? Or at least there's talk of that. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what you see when it comes to bringing manufacturing back to North America. And I mean, me personally, I'm excited, and I hope that happens. I'm just wondering what you're seeing.
I would say that uh, I'm in favor of any initiative that's that is good for the United States. Just in general.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so I don't know what that would really look like. I don't have insight into that. When they say they're bringing it back to the United States, does that mean that they're just making it easier uh, for foreign manufacturers to have a footprint in the United States,
Right.
right? Where they can just actually bring their products closer.
Yeah, that's
and so I don't know what that really would look like. I'd say in a general sense, I mean, the more we can do to create opportunity for anyone here, I think, yeah,
yeah,
totally behind that. And I think that's a big part of what we're doing, by the way. I think uh, that just from an economic, and I mean at the global level, I mean
sure.
the U.S. is behind as far as streamlining supply chains,
Hmm.
and the amount of drag that we have in our supply chain is not helping us.
No.
Right? It's really uh, it's a threat, and I mean on the global stage. There's an element of this is that we need to get with it,
Yeah, man.
uh, because other countries don't have these sensitivities about who stocks what and da 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 da. They're just like, here's the material, here's what it costs, and there's no gaming, and things just get downstream, and it's a very transparent thing. And I think that we really are actually seeing already the consequences of being behind the curve. I think that there's a greater threat at play here, which is I would go so far as to say it's literally, national security level. Like we need to get our goods moving fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad there's people like you that believe that and are doing that. That's awesome. Um, because there's so many people in this country. Well, I'm in Canada, but Canada and United States that are just good people, man, that deserve to have work. And, I mean, let's bring it all home. So anyway, not to get too patriotic. So what innovations are coming? I mean, what are you seeing that's coming down the pike, for Bryzos or just the industry in general, aside from what
Well,
you're doing?
we're learning every day, right? We've done a lot, and I think but we're learning every day. Like, how do people really want to embrace what we're doing? And so there's a lot of kind of A/B or channel testing. Like, let's roll out this product, see how people react to it. Like, because we know what people want, but like, how it's about presentation. How do you get it in front of somebody so they're like, yeah, I'll use that. It's kind of like, can you imagine how many iterations of uh, Kleenexes they went through to be like, okay, that's the Kleenex people like to use. It's like it's kind of the same idea, which is you're always trying to hone, right, the perfect buying experience and the perfect selling experience,
Yeah,
right? Because they both need to be optimized.
sure they do.
Okay, just the transaction, then you have all the post-transaction stuff that needs to be optimized. So what we've done is we've built this platform, and now we're going to like back to the front, and we're just going to keep tightening. And looking ahead, what we're doing is we are going to start creating just instant pricing where there isn't a quoting process, and a buyer can just buy.
Okay.
So think of like Expedia or someplace where you just go buy an airline ticket.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's great because sellers aren't having to quote back and forth.
Hmm.
So we're not creating seller fatigue, right? So we're gonna have like that whole metric of your quote to sale ratio, you don't even track it anymore. It doesn't matter. You just go there and you sell it.
Yeah.
And from the buy side, it's literally the best use of their time.
Yeah.
Like the hunt is over. And so we're literally have pen on paper with that right now.
Yeah.
And getting that
good
really worked out. And that's something we're very excited about. And the other thing is that, we've got our web stores, but also how do we just, for larger distribution companies that maybe you're like, well, we don't need Bryzos. We're the show, guys. It's like, totally agree. So how do we become just like the back end? How do we power what they're doing?
Yeah. And you've kind of got a great idea there with that, supporting them through their own online portal or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's really many things, and you can't be everything to everybody, but I think we're drilling down on a few buckets that are becoming very clear to us, and that's what we work towards. And we release stuff literally like once a week. Like this week, we just released pricing feedback.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a big deal. So up until now, like a seller would quote something and it might just never hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which is, I understand. But the problem with just throwing feedback out is you got to be sensitive about data. Like sellers don't want you just like turning around and telling everybody, what your pricing is. So
Right.
we had to very respectfully come up with pricing feedback systems. And we just released it. It's version 1. I've already received feedback on a few things.
Good.
We're on it. So the pricing feedback, though, it's really more kind of aggregates, and it's a relative pricing feedback, meaning like you were here, they were here, and they were here.
Yeah.
And it just shows you on a relative basis how you did. Because at the end of the day, I asked a user this once, he's like, well, we're getting feedback. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Offline, if someone doesn't buy to you, what is the feedback? I mean, it's always the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, but I get it. Like, I don't have to use this. But the reality is like, what the feedback's going to be.
Yeah.
It's either going to be like they had the right thing at the right time or at the right price. It's going to be one of those 3 things.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so where can everybody find you guys?
Well, you can find us at Bryzos.com. That's Bryzos.com. And I think we've got just a slew of information about like on LinkedIn or like our thread. Like it kind of tells the story of
love your posts by
how. Oh, thanks. It does tell the story of like they give you a sense of it, and it doesn't cost anything to join. No one will know that you did it. Like I said, it's anonymous unless you create a web store, which people are doing more and more. But so anyway, head out to the website, and you can always reach us. Like either chat things all over the place. People tell us we need to like pipe them down. So the real people on the other side of that, sometimes it's me.
Cool, man. Okay, so I really appreciate your time, Shep. I thank you so much. One last question. Just pitch it really simply. Like if I'm a 5-year-old, what's the benefit for Bryzos? Why should I use it?
You want to use Bryzos if you're a buyer to find what you're looking for. Right? If you're a buyer and you need to buy something, come to us. You'll be able to buy it. And if you're a seller, you want to come beyond Bryzos because we have buyers looking for what you sell.
Okay. Beautiful. I love it.
It's as simple as I can go.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much. And look forward to the next time we chat. You have a good day. Enjoy your conference.
Yes, thank you.
You'll learn a lot.
All right, thanks.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Greg Sheldon here, your host of Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the metals and manufacturing industry that make your modern day life possible.